There are two types of banks. The first one is central bank, which is in fact the government bank. The second one is private banks such as HSBC and Hang Seng Bank. Here the table shows the functions of central bank. The second function is acting as the government's banker. For example, when the government wants to sell bonds to the public so as to borrow money from the public, the government needs bank to help her prepare the documents. Another function is to supervise private banks. For instance, the central bank needs to make sure that private banks have enough money and will not close down. The next is to act as lender of last resort during bank runs. Bank run means many people want to withdraw money from a certain private bank at the same time. The private bank may need to close down if it does not have enough cash for the withdrawal. In this case, the central bank can help by lending it some cash so that the private bank will not close down. Besides, central bank administers the clearing house. For example, Mr. Chow has an account in HSBC while the school has an account in Bank of China. If the school gives Mr. Chow a check of $10,000, Mr. Chow's account in HSBC will increase by $10,000 while school's account in Bank of China will decrease by $10,000. In fact, Bank of China needs to pay $10,000 to HSBC. A clearinghouse is needed to help settle payments among different private banks in these situations. In addition, central bank carries monetary policy and manage exchange reserves. These are things we will learn in later chapters. The last function is to maintain the exchange rate. Exchange rate means the price of the currency. For example, in Hong Kong, approximately 7.8 Hong Kong dollar can be exchanged for $1 US. In Hong Kong, we do not have any central bank. These functions are performed by different parties such as Hong Kong Monetary Authority and HSBC. Yet, notice that interest rate in other countries such as the US and China are set by the government. However, in Hong Kong, it is freely determined by each bank. Therefore, different banks may have different interest rates in Hong Kong. Now for these questions, please highlight lending rate, deposit interest rate, interbank offered rate, and discount rate. They are all different names of interest rates. When private banks lend money to businessmen, the interest rate is called lending rate. When people deposit money into private banks, the interest rate is called deposit interest rate. When one private bank lends money to another private bank, the interest rate is called interbank offered rate. When central bank, notice it is central bank, lends money to private banks, the interest rate is called discount rate. You may wonder why private banks need to borrow money from the government. Remember, one function of central bank is acting as the lender of last resort during bank runs. Therefore, sometimes, private banks need to borrow money from the government. Please check the answers. Note that in Hong Kong, interest rates are freely determined and thus C, E, and F are all incorrect. However, G is still correct because HKMA is the lender of last resort in Hong Kong. Please put a star here. After talking about central bank, let us go to private banks. My fifth question is what the function of private banks is? Very simple. First, private banks will receive deposits from the others. Then, what will the private banks do after receiving the deposits? Yes, they will lend the money out. Usually who will get the money? The businessmen, right? So, lastly, the businessmen can make investment using the borrowed money. Therefore, private firms are very important to the economy such that businessmen can have money to make investment. And the function is called channel savings into investment. Savings are called idle funds because people are not using them at the moment. In Hong Kong, there are 3 different types of private banks. The licensed banks, the restricted license banks and the deposit-taking companies. The licensed banks are used by the general public, you and I. For example, Hang Seng Bank and HSBC. The other 2 are usually used by rich people and businessmen. Note that there is no regulation on the maturity of deposits into licensed banks and restricted license banks. That is, people can withdraw at any time. For deposit-taking companies, the minimum maturity period is 3 months. People can only withdraw at least after 3 months. Now please check the answers.